Josh, thank you for coming here today to the Paper Podcast. I'm excited about this episode. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. And the neon sign looks awesome.
Yeah,
nailed it.
Yeah, thanks to Lee. He found it online and designed it. Definitely adds a little flavor, makes everything a little bit more, I think, legitimate in here maybe. But yeah, let me do a brief introduction and why I'm excited to have you and interview you.
Let's just get down
Josh,
to it.
introduce yourself.
My name's Josh Cemelich, and like you said, we've met through mutual friends, and I have a small business. It's called ABTModern. It's ABTModern if you're looking me up on a search engine. When I created my business name, the idea was that there was going to be like the secret handshake club. So if everybody's confused 10 years later, I'm sorry. That's what I thought 10 years ago.
That's great.
But I've lived in DeLand, where your bank's location's at, since I was in high school. My dad worked at Stetson University, which is how my family ended up kind of winding up in this area. And I've left a little bit on and off, but I've mostly stayed. And I started my business 10 years ago, roughly 2013, and had a little experience in e-commerce and kind of coming in and out. Are you picking up on that?
Yeah, you're just backing up a little bit.
Okay. I don't want to be messing that up.
That's perfect.
So I have, experience prior to this in retail and in e-commerce, and decided, hey, I like particular type of furniture. I deal in mid-century modern furniture and Danish modern furniture, and said, hey, why don't I give this thing a go? And I started out of my garage, and I think had started with like $150.
Yeah,
so
that's wonderful.
And started basically buying a piece here and a piece there and fixing a piece up, and then realizing that I needed help in restoration, because I was like, I can find more product and I can work on kind of building the brand out, and that would be a better use of my time. So over the course of time, brought other partners on to help me out with what we're doing. And at this point, we have, one of the largest collections in the state of Florida of the type of furniture that we deal in, and we deal with, clients all over the world. Much of our, product goes to major metros like New York and LA, San Francisco, and work with, some kind of A and B list celebrities and, people that want really particular things. So we exist in a niche market, and try to operate with a level of excellence and high customer service, and, finding really hard to find products, establishing provenance, and, getting our clients exactly what they're looking for.
So in your day-to-day, how important is a relationship with a bank? Is that anything that even goes through your mind? I mean, you've got a successful business. At what point, how did you even choose the banking relationship you're with now? And does that even come into your daily mind? Because, and the reason I'm asking this is, I think bankers have lost touch of why customers choose them, or why they even choose a bank to begin with, and what services are important to them. I think they're being hit by a barrage of products that are saying, here's what your customers want, here's the next thing. And so, with this line of questioning, I have no idea what you're going to say.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of people, and bankers especially, they put words in people's mouths. So I'm very curious to see, is a banking relationship even important to you?
Oh, for sure. Probably to answer maybe your first question, how I established my banking relationship, because I bank with a different bank. And you're probably going to laugh at this, but I got a Wachovia account like in 1990.
Yes.
So I've been with Wachovia Wells Fargo since I was like a little kid.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the progression of that. And I moved to a different bank in the early 2000s, and one of the values that I've always had is chasing yield. and I know we've talked a little bit about how I'm interested in crypto and things like that. For me as a customer, and I guess also, in probably kind of framing how I view small business and small business growth probably needs to be defined too, as we would establish what a good banking relationship for me would be like. And there's probably things that are going to come out in our conversation like, man, I haven't thought of that. I should really consider that. I'm pretty debt averse. So like I said, I started with that $150 and turned the 150 into 300.
That's music to my ears, but a lot of bankers, that's not music to their ears.
Yeah. So I think that, we've had passing conversation in the past about, maybe I'd want to do this for growth, and maybe there's these options with, SBA loans. I've only taken one loan out in the history of my business, and my website's through Shopify. Mm-hmm. So I took like a $50K loan through them on one instance. And the reason why I went with them, and it wasn't because it was my best rate, and I did the math and I was like, this might be really dumb, but because I'm so risk averse, if there was no option for me to be late the next month or the month after that, because it was all contingent on my sales. So basically my repayment to them could come in 3 months, it could come in 3 years. And they basically, have their calculation in that, where they're assuming, based off of what I've done previously in my sales, they're projecting that they're going to be on the better end of the rate. And
so were they taking a percentage of all your sales coming in?
They're taking a percentage of all my sales after the point from which I received the loan. And I'm still repaying that now. So, but for me, it felt safer than getting into some, and I think probably some of that too, in this moment in time, we've seen reduction in clicks, reduction in views. People bought really heavily, especially when people were at home and they couldn't get out, and everybody's renovating their homes and all of that. So we're in a season right now in our business where we're really trying to, kind of tighten our belt, focus on the things that we do really well, and then also kind of looking at gaps that are areas that we need to improve so that we can grow, because we want to take care of our clients that we currently have, and we need to onboard, new customers and let them know about what we do and, why it's good for their design needs.
That's very interesting that you went with, in our world, that would be a fintech. Mm-hmm. So you went with the fintech because of the future payment terms, not on the yield. And my assumption that's typically is what we call factoring. They're going to take a percentage of your sales coming in. So probably generally in the range of 15% or so of what it was. But that was your comfort level because of the payments in the future. Did you at that time even consider going to a large bank, applying online with a larger bank, or going to a community bank? Or did you even know about community banks at the time?
I did, and I thought about it. I think, and I think we probably had a conversation like maybe 2 years ago where we talked about crypto and fintechs a little bit. So like I have kind of a bias and a bent towards, I don't know if it's that I kind of in that millennial Gen X line. Yeah. So maybe I'm just rebellious enough that it's like, screw the system. I'm going to do it different. Maybe it comes from something like that inside myself, but, Shopify, they'd reached out to me a number of times, and their customer support's great. I mean, I've had a tremendous experience with them. I'm
sure that loan was still funded by a bank. It was just Shopify as the front.
But they're the front for sure. Yep. And when I had the initial conversation with their sales rep, was kind of like, hey, this is what we can do. This is what it looks like. This is how we can get you future funding, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, how soon can I get it? He's like, well, like probably like 2 or 3 days, maybe like 24 hours. And I'm like, cool. So
all right, speed was a big
So I felt like in that moment, when I had made the decision that I wanted the money, I wanted access to that, I wanted it quickly. And it just felt like, am I going to go shop this out now? Or, I do the math in my head and I'm like, my worst case scenario, maybe I'm, shelling out an extra $2 or $3 grand than I would prefer to with another loan option. But is it worth it to basically, and I probably should have shot you an email at that point and be like, hey, now that we're here doing this, you would have been like, yeah, you would have done better with that.
We should have done better on our drip campaign. So we would have been front of mind. Thanks, Lee.
Those drip campaigns, those are where they're at. So I'm working on those right now.
That's great. But so you didn't even think the current bank that you had a personal account with, a business account, you didn't go to them at all, or they just didn't think that was in their wheelhouse?
My personal bank right now, and Wells Fargo, if you're out there listening, they've, provided a very low level of customer service to me for a very long time. And I've had a couple of reps that I've worked with there. I had one in particular that moved on, and he was great and really, on it, conscientious. But in my opinion, they're either at least locally, they're either understaffed, which I think is a high possibility, or they're just, maybe there's improvements at least locally that they could do with their team to really be, trying to accommodate my needs a little bit better. But because of the fact that I'm not, seeking out loans regularly, and I'm not going to my bank for yield, it's just to hold the money as it moves around. That's all it's doing for me.
Gotcha.
And I can, with being with like a larger bank like that, if I'm, traveling or I'm out of town, or if I got to run to an ATM, or, at one point I was, and I still am, but I was like our primary buyer. So I'm on the road, and when you're buying antiques, it's not like you're just, here's this contract and let me give you the business check. Some people want cash, and, you have a need to just kind of have a lot of ATMs, and, so it was just kind of like, well, it's easy for what I'm doing.
Because they didn't piss you off enough to look elsewhere.
No. And I've threatened before, like every now and then I get grumpy.
I'm sure it really hurt their feelings.
Probably not. So, but yeah, I think that there's probably products that you guys have that I should be considering, and I don't know if now on this podcast or.
Yeah, my teacher wasn't here to sell you on us, but to get the unfiltered reasoning and decision making, because, I've kind of found, in my career when we're going out to get just an average consumer to convert, we had this, well, you're a community bank. So the assumption was, there's ATM networks, but you don't have an ATM everywhere. It's like, well, okay, we're part of Allpoint. So technically we have more ATMs than the top four banks. We've got access to 60,000, 90,000 ATMs and free, surcharge networks, things like that. There's a person you should actually talk to, but it was that barrier. And I found that, people love to say they do community involvement, shop community, but when it comes to financial services, they still kind of have in the back of your head, like, wait a second, they may not have all the offerings as a big bank, even though we do. So it's still, it's kind of a positive and negative out there that I've seen. And then two, I found the consumers that we want as customers, they're not mad at their bank because they're in good financial standing, so they're not out there doing things that would make them mad at their bank, because 9 out of 10 times when in a career, when I have people that come in and ask about the bank and they are just mad at it and so pissed off at their bank, really 9 times out of 10, it was their fault. It wasn't like, I had poor customer service. When they're mad at, they returned this check, they didn't call me. Typically, most of the time it was their fault, and they're going to be a problem customer going forward. And so it's difficult, because I know, do you look at banking as kind of like a commodity? Like, yeah, it's out there, and you said, and it was almost like sticking it to the man. Do you think that like banks are owned by the government, or what relationship do you think they have with the government?
Well, I mean, I think there's a safety factor that myself and probably a lot of Americans, Westerners, like about banks. You like the idea that it's FDIC insured, and you feel like, it's like a certain level of like comfort and safety in that. So as stable and safe as our government is, then as stable as that is, more or less. But when we get into the whole banking system, and do I think the banks, owned by the government, what I know that you're highly regulated, I know that a lot of monetary decisions are being made by, the Federal Reserve that are affecting, what kind of yield I can get, what my loans will be. And I didn't vote for any of those guys. They're
appointed. Yeah.
Yeah. For me personally, I wish that I had more confidence in my government with how they handle kind of the financial regulations, and kind of as that trickles down to the traditional banking system. And I think that for myself, and it's not just specific to banking, it's in a lot of my life, having kind of a feeling of autonomy and sovereignty and independence, I feel like a greater level of safety and comfort in that than in trusting, kind of traditional institutions. And I know that, you guys with what you're doing in banking and some of that, feels like it exists underneath the umbrella of the regulations, but that you're kind of looking at other clients that are doing things in new spaces and innovating, and as finance is innovating. And that's appealing to me because I'm not so committed to, well, I'm only going to, keep my whatever I make in Bitcoin, and I'm only going to self-custody my coins or something like that. I think, and there's a lot of, Bitcoin maximalist or crypto maximalist that would think that I would be foolish, that I would want to even maintain some level of relationship with the bank and meeting my particular needs. But I want to have, a pretty well diversified bag, if you will.
Oh, absolutely.
And
you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's probably more of a place for me, as a customer individually, but also as a small business owner, to be doing things with, maybe my local bank. So
do you have any unanswered questions about the banking system, or any other thoughts or concerns, or?
Not really that I can think of. I mean, I think that there's stuff that I probably wish that you could do for me, and there's probably things that you wish you could do for me.
Yeah, but name one.
But well, like if you guys had an option right now where I could self-custody some amount of like Bitcoin with you,
so you
through, but I could have insurance on that. It would be like another way where I'd say like, okay, well, I might keep some portion of my portfolio, or if I get a sale through my website.
So you would be more comfortable if banks did offer or have offer custodial services?
I think that if I felt enough of a comfort level in the bank, but the thing is, that's one of those things that in my mind, I would always be kind of gas brake, downshifting, moving gears, because granted, we've seen a relative level of stability in our nation, and really leading the world, especially since World War II, that you kind of just feel like you're always going to be safe with your bank. But I remember seeing videos that went viral, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. Where was it? It was somewhere in the Middle East. Do you remember the guy that went and held up the bank, and
I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, I think it was Lebanon, but I'm not 100% sure. So fact check me. But there's this guy, and he wanted to go withdraw like $200,000, and he's there, and he's got a gun, and it's a big gun, and everybody's scared, and it looks awful. It's like his money. And the reason why, at least he claims that he did it, is his father's in the hospital, and he has to pay his father's hospital bills. So, he exists in this honor culture where in his culture, he's doing the thing that he's supposed to do. And, the idea of, if I could have the right partner to custody things for me, that's wonderful. But the worst case scenario is I want to go get it at some point, and somebody hit the pause button or the freeze button. And I think that that's scary to any consumer at any level.
Yeah. So going back, well, we didn't get there, but it would probably scare the living shit out of you if the government said, no, we're going to do a central depository, a CBDC, a central currency, cryptocurrency.
I think it's coming.
Yes. But would you avoid that?
I think at some level you have to exist, within the constraints and also maybe the blessings of the nation that you live in and that you're a part of. So, to the greater level of oversight and regulation that the government provides, I don't think that myself as an individual, that just because I feel like I should have more personal sovereignty, that it's going to play out that way, or I can talk to enough of my buddies. And I think that that's why hopefully, when it comes to the election process, that we're supporting candidates that we think, share our values, and hopefully through a democratic system, we can have candidates that at least see that they're citizens who make money, and their desire is that they want to have prosperity for their families, and they want to have some level of like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in their life.
They don't want their assets seized.
Yes.
For what's going on in our northern borders.
Yes. Yeah. And that kind of stuff, it's like, it's not that far away if that's what we allow our leaders to do,
And and I think the makeup right now of the banking system is fantastic. I mean, banks, we have a responsibility to have controls in place, to avoid, to monitor suspicious activity, which that comes to money laundering, terrorism, human trafficking. And, I can't find anybody that disagrees with that. And, banks have to have those programs. We have we have a huge department that is dedicated to all this, that we monitor, and we take that stuff very seriously. But, we're kind of the stopgap. When we are examined, when the regulators feel that they're comfortable with the banks that have strong controls, that's it. They don't have access to customers' bank accounts and numbers. They don't. And, my fear is having some central to where then the government does have complete access and knows all the account systems, and, on a whim, freeze accounts, because, we still have due process. You still have, innocent until proven guilty.
I agree. And it's, I feel like in this moment too, and, in my worldview, ultimately, like I believe that there's a God that's overseeing things, and that I need to not get too worried about these kind of details of life. But as I'm watching and as I'm being watchful, there's stuff that it's kind of like, okay, I want to have the appropriate caution. And when you see that the government, passes a bill where they're adding like 90,000 new IRS agents after they
I mean, who are they? They're going to go after.
They're going to go after small bubusinesses.
It's going to be self-employed. They're not going to go after people that are W-2 income because tax is already taken out. It's simple. They're going to go after businesses. How are they not?
So, initially I find myself in a situation where, more or less I'm forced to close my doors for a small period of time. And, that was unique in Florida to a lot of other states. So government has the power where they're basically like, hey, you're in small business, and the way that you provide for your family, the way that you provide for the team that you work with is that you work, and now we're going to take that away from you. But the solution for that is that we're going to give you money that, we're not on the gold standard anymore. It wasn't like we did something that created that value.
Yeah.
That, the government creates that out of thin air. And now, everything is so incredibly inflated. And, I think the government, is redefining terms like a recession, which is just wild to me.
That was amazing.
They're redefining financial terms. And I think anybody who's watchful says, well, if you're going to do these things, if you're going to say you can't work when you want to work, and if they're going to say, we're going to give you this because you can't provide for yourself now because we told you that you can't work, but now that we gave it to you, we think that you were not scrupulous and you were dishonest with this stuff we made up in the first place, and now we're going to audit you.
Yeah. And then too, I think it's a fallacy too, that you always have to, that it's always improve your sales, because, as a business, Surety Bank's operated, we're a business just like you. At the end of the day, it's not what your gross sales is, it's what's in your pocket at the end. Mm-hmm. So even if your sales didn't increase, but you got more efficient and your net income's higher, what's more important?
Yeah.
So, this always chasing greater doesn't always mean better.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I always find struggle with that when you're looking at financials. And, it's not impressive to me when I see someone increase their sales 50%, but yet their income didn't increase.
Yeah, for sure.
Not to get on that tangent, but
no, I mean, that's something that I'm trying to do right now, because I mean, as a small business, we've kind of existed in that, 500,000 to $1 million kind of, figure. And the goal is to kind of get to that next step of kind of that 1 to 2 million, which I think is doable, but things are changing now. So as things change, you adjust. I mean, at the end of the day, we're in business to make money. Like I love our product. I love the people that I work with and all of that. But if I wanted to be in a charity, I'd be in a charity, because that would,
to continue providing your services, you have to make money.
Yeah. So in this moment now, like you're saying, goals change, and you're saying, well, maybe the goal now for this next, 2 quarters is, can I maintain my net?
So what, you said the gold standard. So, crypto was, in the 60,000 per Bitcoin, assuming that, that's your main crypto of choice, Bitcoin. And now it's, 24,000 at this time. Yeah. How did you feel with the drop? Are you comfortable at the current level?
I think that, anybody who is in the space and has been in the space, initially when you experience it, if you haven't experienced anything stressful like that financially before, of course you're going to be stressed out by it. But I think that I almost think of it kind of in the way of sort of like when you're desensitizing yourself, like in therapy. Like if you believe, like a soldier is trained, goes through training, boot camp, yada, 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 war drills, then in war, that type of thing. And at some point, it's not that you don't fear it, but that you're so well trained for the thing that you believe in, that you press forward, and you might press forward in a new way with more bravery, because you believe in the thing that you're fighting for. And I think that my opinion on Bitcoin and Ethereum, primarily at this point, I think that there's enough people worldwide that buy into kind of banking yourself, trying to be a part of something that you could argue for kind of like the philosophical values of, if you live in the developing world and you're really poor, the thing that you want the most probably is US dollars, but maybe even more so Bitcoin, if you can hold it long enough, because your currency, and we've seen that in Sri Lanka, we've seen that in Venezuela, seen that
soon
in Argentina.
Colombia.
Yeah. And it's terrifying, really. And actually I'm still very long for these, kind of these like blue chip crypto, currencies, if you will. Because I think that there's enough people worldwide, that are buying in. And I think that institutions are kind of getting on board, but they're slower because of regulation.
So I've noticed a shift in this year. Banks were, going to adoption. They're like, oh no, now I have fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. So I missed out in the beginning. So I'm heading that direction, and we're going to look into some crypto offerings. And so they've been going to the least path of resistance by, maybe the rewards on their debit cards for the customers can go to, Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And, so they're kind of like, hey, we're cool. We're offering that. Yeah. I look at those offerings and see that, okay, great. You're probably getting less earnings that you were getting prior because you don't know the pricing they're buying it at. And it's, done at the end of the day, and there's arbitrage involved, and so it's like, okay, great. It's almost like you're pandering to, the true crypto enthusiasts. But now, since it dropped, there's been financial institutional letters sent out by regulators that says, hey, any bank, if you have anything to do with crypto custody or this, you need to let us know. And before you get into it, you need feedback. And so where I believe that, cryptocurrencies and especially stable coins, because I don't know one stable coin, if it's stable, they've got that exact amount in an account somewhere that is held. It's not being invested in other stuff, so they're looking at that and they're saying, what, it dropped and we need to protect the consumers. So then they're going to go over-regulate. Yeah. And so now banks, I see, we're not even going that least cost. We're going to stop even thinking about it. And, that can be bad too.
Well, I imagine for you in this moment, and especially since, from past conversations, that some of the space that you guys have existed in as a bank is partnering with businesses that are doing some, cryptocurrency.
I look at it as a complete opportunity.
Yeah.
I definitely believe there needs to be a regulation framework. And so in our eyes, there's already regulation framework set up for other alternatives things. So when we look at customers that, may buy or sell crypto, we look at, they have the framework that would mirror other things, that they're sourcing their customer, they're getting their KYC, know their customers, sourcing the funds. And, if somebody just out of nowhere bought, $100,000 of Bitcoin, they need to do the same thing as if a bank does. Like, okay, Josh, thank you for the 100,000, but what do you do? How do you, you need to make sure, there's an obligation. So, that just has to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I understand. I mean,
yeah. But in my mind, over the years, we have to ask businesses. I mean, every business, when we open an account, we got to get a reasonable belief of the identity of the person, and we have to have an expected activity of what their account's going to be. But if you actually sit down into an average business customer to open up a checking account, let's say, no matter what they are, you ask them, well, how many ACHs are you going to do a month? I don't know what ACH is. Yeah. Well, how many debits or credits? They don't know. And then they're kind of like in fear, like, do I have to know the exact amount? What if it changes? Am I going to be suspicious? Yeah. Well, how many wires do you intend? I don't know. Maybe one, maybe two. And maybe they've never sent a wire out. Maybe they've just, they're going to wire money to when they buy their first home or and they don't know. So to me, like that first kind of expectation, the businesses, they're just kind of normal, unless they are just moving the account and you see their bank statement, like, all right, there's expected activity and what we know in your industry, and we, monitor and go from there. But
yeah, I imagine, you probably have people that are coming in that don't have a clue. On the whole wire thing, that's something that I didn't have a clue about. And then I've done, some international sales. Man, I did not realize that those international wires were as expensive as they were. Well,
it's antiquated. I mean, it goes through one network. It's an old network.
Yeah.
And so
that's one of the use cases. Cause I think that there's a certain healthy, pessimism regulation that's coming from the government in respect to many cryptocurrencies. Cause they're like, what are they doing? And there's, there's a lot of bad players in the market where people are just over leveraged and they're getting wiped out. There's people that are basically creating Ponzi schemes that are big rug pulls.
Absolutely.
And all of that's bad, and it's bad for press, and it's bad for people's lives that participate in it. But to have systems in place that provide lower fees and quicker and more efficient international remittances, I think that's a tremendous use case. And I think that over the course of time, that's going to be one of the things that we'll see that cryptocurrency options are going to kind of create new opportunities, because there's no reason why we're still operating on, is it the SWIFT system?
SWIFT for international, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, why are we still doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. So it's like, let me get my rotary phone out. It's like the same kind of words.
It is. And I think you're another great use case. I mean, you sell furniture, so those are going to be higher dollar. Those aren't $15 transactions. and I've looked at your furniture. It's beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, support locally.
Yeah, absolutely. Next renovation, we're coming to you. And, so you can have high ticket items in the thousands. So if I was in your shoes and I'm selling a $4,000 or $5,000 furniture, absolutely, I would prefer accepting Bitcoin as exchange and credit card because, there's zero chargeback risk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you accept credit cards too?
Yeah. I mean, that's mostly what people are paying with for me. And that's, one of those things that I would let, if I mess up, I want to take care of my customer. I mean, that's like value one, customer service. But being in retail and having been in retail long enough, and it sucks when you're in small business, is there's scammers out there.
Have you been affected yet by a chargeback?
Yeah, I've had people that have bought product for me. I've basically gone through the process of providing like a burden of proof and basically will win, and then people will appeal the chargeback. And the credit card companies and banks that I've dealt with that I've been on the other side, they just don't care. So and I know that there's people out there that are running that game because they know.
Absolutely. So we see it here, and there's a lot of good consumer regulations, Reg E out there, which has to do with electronic transfers. And we see consumers dispute stuff just because they were either unhappy, and they'll tell us, oh, I didn't purchase that. There's no way for us to 100% verify, but we know. You can kind of tell from the activity levels and things that chances are, they bought it. Yeah. Now they just want their money back or whatever. So they're gaming, they're using the system. Yeah. And my assumption is there's way more fraud out there initiated by consumers.
Way more.
Than elsewhere. And so we have to give provisional credit when a consumer in the time frame disputes a charge.
Yeah.
And then on the networks, and I didn't know this on the cards, we end up eating most of the time.
Okay.
Because if it's under $100, the networks are like, we won't even take that. And, they've got all these little caveats.
Yeah.
And just left and right. And so many of the disputes, we end up charging. We end up having to eat that cost.
That's got to stink.
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating because you're like, great. Once, we're offering a service, we're making, and typically a lot of times on those accounts, you're losing money on that. Banks notoriously have a lot of lost leaders out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I personally, I know, it's unfair, but if a customer ever says, oh yeah, I bank with you, I know 99.9% of my customers, but if that one sneaks through and says, I bank with you, and they're not top of mind, I know it's a good customer because I've never been alerted. Because of course the ones you deal with the most are the ones that they have an issue. They haven't made their payment, or they're negative on their account statements and everything, and you're trying to collect. So yes, consumer fraud's out there pretty bad. So so I mean, I guess you're not going to have any of that if somebody was to pay you crypto.
Yeah, but it's just at this point it's the cost of doing business. So I keep trying to explore new options in the market that are better for me and better for business. But at the end of the day, we live here, we live in this time, we exist under these regulations, and you have that. If you want to be in business now here, that's what you're going to work with. So you got to learn how to work with what you got.
I really want to circle back to other important things that you would use in a traditional bank setting. How important is I'll name a couple of them and you go from them. A lot of banks add on things that they call it's called PFM, performance, kind of like a mint.com, like manage your payables. How important that is to you to know how much you spend at coffee every month, that it comes to you in that area, the performance management software,
I mean, it's important.
Do you even pay attention to that, or you already know? Yes, I spend too much on coffee, and
way too much. Yeah,
I did too. And that's where I run into you every day.
Yeah. I have these moments too, where it's like, oh gosh, the economy's changing. I gotta sit down with Karen, my wife, and we gotta do the budget. We gotta. I'm like, I'm not getting rid of coffee. Yeah. But I
are those tools important to you in your banking?
I think I have most of them kind of centralized through like my accounting software.
Okay.
So, and I think that,
So the short answer, no.
yeah, I mean, I think if everything was coming in, like I almost imagine like 50 years ago, like you're my bank,
Yeah.
everything just comes through you and we like write the check and it's all there. But I sell on like maybe 5 marketplaces. I accept payment in like 10 different types of ways.
Okay.
And I'm trying to like organize all of that, and it doesn't all fall under the same umbrella for me at this point of like, it's not all under the Wells Fargo umbrella,
It can be under the QuickBooks. And
yeah. So it's almost like what's the way to most efficiently kind of, capture all of that information so that I know what's going where.
Now on like bill pay options, do you use that through your bank or are you using that through your accounting software?
Most of that I set up individually with whoever the institution is that I have bill pay with. And then
I personally like doing that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I mostly just set up recurring on most things just to make my life easier. So, but I've thought about it before. I'd be like, well, if you can mail this check for me on this date and this, again, it's just that it feels so like we should have the ability that like, I want to send you something on my phone and I do it and I send it and now you got it. Or I set the rule that it does that. But some of these, systems that exist in place, they just feel really antiquated to me. I don't know. For other businesses, they might be much more appropriate,
Yeah. And that's when, everything, there's a lot of beautiful front facing architecture of quick payments or bill pays. But what's funny is even some major providers may be paying a car payment to a major bank and you go through bill pay and they still have to issue a check because they weren't a part of that network. Okay. And so there's so many networks behind it. And at the end of the day, you're still residing on old, antiquated Fed systems.
For sure. Yeah. And it's like, just because I feel like I sent you this and now you have this, it's like, well, how long is it pending? When is it going to clear? It's, I think that I'll speak for myself. I think a lot of people kind of feel like it's just all happening in real time and it's really not, so.
Yeah. I mean, you want to make sure you don't, if you mailed the check, obviously it hadn't come out of your account yet, but if you have bill pay, you expect it out of the account. But, if it's out of my account and they didn't get payment yet, then I'm not earning any interest on it. That's not fair too. So I definitely get where you're coming from.
So,
all right. So improved bill pay. It sounds like banks need to have, I guess either partner or have better accounting software. I mean, that's where I see a lot of businesses, they're doing, their performance metrics, they're going through, a QuickBooks, and I think Blue Jeans is one. A lot of the accounting and small business account software, and then linking their bank accounts.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah. So that's
that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got any? I think you've answered kind of like a lot of my questions. What you look for in the bank, and so to summarize, future, being enthusiasts of cryptocurrency, you would like it if banks were custodian, but on top of that had another level of insurance.
Yeah. And there's a couple exchanges that are partnered with banks that are offering some insurance products. I don't know what you would probably know better than me on like.
Well, they're not FDIC insured.
So I understand that. No, I understand that, but they're like third party, and like how I haven't gone deep enough down the rabbit hole to find out like how legitimate of an insurer this.
Correct. Yeah. Whether they're AAA rated, is it Lloyd's of London? How are they doing that? And they're monitoring. Yeah. What I've kind of seen too is, I've seen some new banks that come out that have recently got charters and that they're doing custodial services, but also within the first year, I saw a consent order that their, anti-money laundering policies weren't up to date. So it's kind of like, that irritates the piss out of me, how within a year those policies weren't acceptable to the government when they would have looked at them prior to even, giving them a charter. So what happened during that time frame? did that bank not do what they say they were going to do? Did the regulators change their mind? And, we take all of that so seriously and go above and beyond the regulations. So we're here tomorrow to offer services to our customers. And, it's just frustrating. And then seeing the continued growth in it, what I think is, definitely unsafe growth that they're doing, and then getting consent orders. It's, come on, what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, in the next couple of years, there'll be more regulation. So we'll kind of know where we stand and who can do what. That's, was it the Toomey Loomis bill that they put forward? Is that right? Am I getting the right centers?
I mean, so many of the bills I don't even follow because when I did, I would invest so much time in it, and then they would never pass, or they would pass, and then when they would filter down to the banks, it would be completely different.
Yeah.
It was a lot like when the PPP loans came out.
Yeah.
We would get calls, we can get this, because they heard on TV, but they hadn't even delivered it yet to the Small Business Administration for them to give us the exact procedures and rules of how they wanted us to qualify and submit and everything. So, we didn't know anything to the day of. So it's kind of like a lot of those bills, okay.
Yeah.
Once for sure, yes is in place, this was approved, then we dive in, we understand it before we jump into that activity. But
that makes sense.
Prior to it, it's just we'd be spinning our wheels because 99% of it doesn't come through, and when it does, it's completely different than what they said.
Yeah. What do you think about BlackRock getting into the space for custody? Have you heard about that?
No, I mean, but it's amazing what I think is, where the government considers risky. I mean, to me, cryptocurrency, they want consumers that, hey, it may devalue. Well, absolutely. Are they putting a disclaimer on a US dollar that it may devalue because of our absorbent spending? I mean, I don't know about you, my dollar's devalued this past year.
That's a bad looking chart if you look at the 50-year chart.
Exactly. So, I mean, the only reason the US is doing really well is because every other country is doing worse.
Yeah.
So, let's be real. All of them should have disclosures on them.
Yeah.
And, people need to do their own research before they invest. They need to know. I think diversification is always key. Don't put your eggs in one basket. You never should. I mean, the same way in banking. We can't put our assets in one basket, and no bank should do that. Yeah.
It's an interesting time. And I imagine in banking, it's a really interesting time too.
Yeah. But I think everything, the only constant is change. So it's going to be something new tomorrow, and we just have to look at it, take strides. But a lot of the same risk assessments that you do, it's the same thing carrying forward.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent, like on the cash isn't going away.
No.
Anytime soon. And then I think crypto's here to stay too.
Yeah.
But the one, thing about crypto is, it's not anonymous.
Yeah.
And the one amazing thing that I do like about it is you can track it after the fact.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing too, where it's like you have with Bitcoin 99 point pretty much 99999, almost 100%. You have an immutable ledger, which is that you could bring up
Can't
right
change
now.
it.
Yeah. You can bring up on your phone right now. And if I do something shady with it, you can find me.
Exactly.
Like it's right
and
there.
so
It's not,
if we see some possible suspicious activity, but it's not, we want to continue to monitor. What's amazing is, okay, they purchased that crypto. You put that in the blockchain, and we can get alerted down the road if they were to purchase something on known darknet sites, and now you got it. When somebody takes cash out of the bank, you have no idea what they're going to do with it.
You have no idea.
But you're doing that. So there's definitely eyes. So, I mean, it's something that I think it's amazing that, the government should probably embrace better.
Yeah.
As opposed to, if they truly want to protect the public, they should embrace it and have, some stability constraints on it.
Yeah. I think that you're going to see more nations. I think that you're going to get a central currency. It's going to come out of China, a digital yuan And I think the EU is going to probably try to do something at some point too. And it's probably going to happen here because that idea of having that real-time immutable ledger that they can change if they want to, but the dollar though, and to your point too, are you familiar with Santiago Capital? I can't remember the guy's name out of there. They're a capital firm out of Puerto Rico, and the guy managed like a $100 billion fund. I mean, he managed a really big fund, and then he went out on his own. But he has this theory now that's called the dollar milkshake theory. I was actually telling Lee about that. Very interesting. And I actually don't think it's great for crypto in the moment either. But basically it's saying that like, because of what's happened in these times, really, especially post-COVID, but a lot of things that were, moving into place beforehand, all of this liquidity is basically like being put into like what you would imagine like your goop for like a milkshake.
Okay.
And what's going to happen now is people are going to want to get liquidity out because they need it. They need it, whether it's to just try to pay their bills to survive or to, buy low and stuff's, cheap and to make money and all that. And how are you going to do that? And the best vehicle to do that is the US dollar. And it's really a crazy moment. In my work, I deal with contractors, and I have some like international contractors that I work with, and I'll look at the exchange rate. What is the Egyptian pound now to the US dollar? Because I have a tech guy that I work with who's out of Egypt. I have a guy that I work with out of Indonesia, and it's like we go to the grocery store now and we want to buy our bag of coffee or whatever, and it costs way more. And we're like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like I'm not making that much more money. I still want to buy my coffee, but we're doing so much better than the rest of the world. And in this theory of, this milkshake theory, it's basically like the straw to extract liquidity is the US dollar, and everybody else is going to try to do it now, but with like a syringe. And it's like, wow, that's a pretty powerful picture. It's scary.
That makes a lot of sense because Europe has a more open banking system. So there's a lot more fintechs and accounts in that fintech world that aren't banks, but they reside on banks. But the one thing they all have in common is they all want access to the US dollar. So they're always looking for correspondent banking relationships in the US. And so, yeah.
So it's a good time to be banking US dollars, I think.
Yeah. That is a market for some U.S. banks if they do it right and they have controls, because there's a lot of work to put into if you're banking correspondent companies. You need to vet who they're getting their money from, and there's risks associated with that. But they all want access to the U.S. dollar. They want to have access to cryptocurrency and U.S. dollar.
Yeah. And it's probably going to be good too. And I think that we're going to,
I can't blame them because you have Brexit.
Yeah.
So there's,
for sure. So, and I think that my hope is for our markets that because of it, we'll have more money moving in. Maybe not even because our markets are so healthy and whole, because, it's
just
like
doing better than the rest.
Just doing better than the rest. So it's like, what's a better place for your yield?
I've got a great analogy for it, but it's definitely not PC, so I'm not going to say it.
You'll have to tell me when the mics are off.
But absolutely. Yeah. It's just amazing. It's kind of like when somebody compliments you on something and you're like, yeah, but I'm doing half as good as I really want to be doing. Like, it's not a compliment. It's just because that, I won the race, but I can do 10 times better than that,
For sure. Yeah. I'm thankful, to be in America, be in small business here. I feel for...
I don't know what other country to move to.
Yeah. I feel for a lot of people now. There's a lot of hardworking people that are decent, honest people that want to do the best thing for their families or their communities. And they're as wrecked as we're getting. They're getting wrecked.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. No, I went to Costa Rica for the first time in May, and, at the resorts and the hotels we stayed at, you ask them, like, what did you do during COVID? There was no assistance to the average worker. The teachers and the medical and a few sects got paid down there, but they were dependent on tourism. And so, okay, well, you obviously weren't serving at the hotel. What did you do? Anything I could, any job, whether it was to go pick up trash, was to do this. I mean, they took any job possible. So, yeah, we definitely, I know, take it for granted here. And
for sure. How was your trip?
We had a fantastic time.
That's good.
Definitely love to go back. It was a beautiful area. Have you been?
I haven't been. It's on my bucket list. So
yeah, for sure. You got to make that happen.
I'll do it, man.
Great straight flight from Orlando, and
hey, can't beat that.
All right. Well, I think we have enough for today. And Josh, thank you so much for coming. And
yeah, thank you. And when we finish this up, I'll probably ask you a couple questions about SBA loans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get you out of that factoring loan and pay off Spotify real quick, so save you some money.
Yeah, well, I can handle my Spotify. It's the Shopify.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, if you need to borrow money for Spotify, that's another conversation.
I'll see you later, man.
All right, have a good one. Thank you for listening to the Paper Podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. Share with a friend or on social media. See you next time on the Paper Podcast.